Welcome to this fourth episode of this podcast where we cover everything related to software engineering and the industry in general. This podcast is self-sponsored by arol.dev. We are a software academy where we train software engineers of all levels. In this fourth episode, we bring Giacomo, who is an expert in no-code technologies, to talk about everything that is related to this not new, but currently coming up side of the
growing
technology that is also like a core part, or is becoming a core part of the industry right now in some parts that we're going to discover now. So welcome, Giacomo.
Well, thanks for having me.
So first, to start, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I come from traditional software development. I develop products for startups and for companies for the past, almost 8 years. And my last company was a service company. So we were basically building software for B2B. And the more we were building and starting to explore no-code technologies, the more I was realizing that there was no need for transition from no-code to traditional code in those kind of instances. Mm-hmm. So eventually we doubled down completely, and now I basically do it as a freelancer full time. So to create B2B solutions with low-code and no-code technologies.
Right. So this transition from software engineering, like the classic software engineering, into now no-code technologies as a service,
That's it.
Freelancing. That's nice. Can you start by giving like a brief introduction of what is no-code and how it's impacting the software engineering industry?
Sure. So no-code is a very fragmented market, so to say. So I would say that the broader definition that one could give is just getting a result that you would otherwise have to get through coding with some kind of visual interface. So instead of having to write most of your code, you have a graphical user interface that usually with blocks and this kind of if-then logic, you could create some kind of output without having to necessarily write code, or to write, in case of low code, the minimum amount of code as possible. And as I said, I mean, the environment is extremely fragmented, and that's kind of one of the main drawbacks of this, but I think we will get back to this. Anyhow, at the simplest form, no code is just achieving what you would achieve with code without, basically.
Right. So that's, I suppose, that the impact is democratizing a lot, like this, like the creation of solutions in software engineering, and you come from this, let's say, from this origin as a software engineer, or from the software engineering industry?
Yeah, I come from design eventually. So
Okay.
I went back. I mean, I've been coding since I'm 14, but I've never been like a professional developer. But no code is amazing if you know code.
Yeah,
is also extremely good for different reasons. We're probably gonna talk about this. If you don't know anything about coding,
right? But it leverages, no?
Exactly. It is even better because eventually, in most cases, the tools work with the same abstractions that you would use when you code.
Right.
So it's much easier to pick them up if you know how to code.
Of course, yeah. You come out already with this background in
Exactly.
which you already understand how these systems work and everything. Okay, we're going to get more into like these details about what can like if it's more or less difficult, if it's more democratized. But now I want to go deeper into like what you told us, that you had like an agency, you said,
Yes.
where you were doing software classical servicing software engineering, and then you went into no code. I'm interested on what triggers that, like specifically, and what were the first steps into doing that?
Yeah, that was very clear for us. So basically, we were not a software house. So, and maybe some of the listeners work for software houses, own software houses. I don't have a problem with software houses, but let's say that the traditional software house is not necessarily good at building products. They build software, and they build software very well written very well written code. They go through the specifics. So, they do the work well from their point of view. We were a product agency. So eventually our goal was to make a product and make a product that would work, And so it is more the relationship between business, design, and software. So a big part of building a product is prototyping, So we optimize our stack for fast iteration. You can call it like agile development, put the label that you want, but at the core, it means starting with some assumptions, get something developed very fast or designed very fast so you can get into the hands of the users and then iterate,
Right.
And no-code solutions would allow us to be extremely fast especially in the very early stages, right? And the simplest way I can say the first approach that I had with that was with two tools. One that is going to surprise some, but I totally consider a no-code tool, which is spreadsheets. That's kind of the grandfather of all no-code tools. Eventually, it is when you create a formula, it is a function. When you write equals if parentheses, it is an if statement. Instead of writing in JavaScript, you just write it in a Excel cell. But eventually,
it's an engine.
It's cool. It's code. And the cool thing is that you have the database, the interface, and the logic in the same how can I say, in the same screen, in the same view. That's what makes it very successful and flexible. So we started going to companies that had like gigantic Excels, and we would just start automating some of the tasks that we would do with Excel, within Excel. We would use Google Sheets because there is basically a library for Google Apps, which is called Google Apps Script, that is just JavaScript basically, and enables anyone to automate pretty much everything inside the Google workspace.
Nice.
And we would just start with that, just to test some assumptions.
Which actually is a product. Like it's part of the product that they were using, so it's the service that you were providing,
Exactly.
right? It's like, that's our interface. We want you to tweak
Exactly.
that interface for
so
us.
it was just to test some assumptions before jumping into necessary to create a new interface, a new software. And obviously you cannot stay there that much because for obvious reasons there are some problems there, but it's just, all right, we don't have necessarily to jump from design to a fast prototype in React. We can jump from design to let's build something extremely simple in whatever tool they're using, Excel, or like a simple prototype with other tools that maybe we're going to talk about later. Like then it became like Airtable, then it became Bubble, then it became Xano. I mean, all the other million tools that are out there in no-code land, so to say.
That's interesting because it's like you're telling me this story. As you're telling this story, I'm trying to solve it myself as it's my client and my monkey software engineering brain. Like that part of the brain is like, I can do an app for that. It's like, and I remember having like a partner in my agency, in my software development agency, that was actually the counterpart, which is like I always wanted to do an app, and it's like, no, wait, can we do it without an app? So that's like. A little bit.
I mean, eventually you're building software because the output of whichever no-code tool it is software.
Right. Yeah.
And some of them, maybe low-code solution, can actually export production code. I mean, think about Webflow. That is one of the most famous ones. You can just export React, or Flutterflow. You just export
so then you
Flutter
can take
app.
the control back if you want to.
Exactly. If you want to, you just take it, and it's just a visual interface to build something that eventually you can customize as much as you want, potentially.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned two technologies. The first you said spreadsheets. The second one you said.
I mean, the second one eventually for us was Bubble back then.
Okay.
And actually, that was my first approach to no code ever in, I guess, 2014, when Bubble was very small. And I built an MVP for the first startup I was involved in, and we raised the first round with a prototype that was made in Bubble. So
that's cool.
These are kind of the two what are for me the main use cases, but we're probably gonna talk about this later. The two main branches of use cases for no code and low code, which is building MVPs, so minimum viable products for whatever idea you have, startup ideas, and to create internal tools. So you are in a company, big or small, instead of having, engineers, engineering brain power focused on something internal, you just can focus on, products that are going to be used by your main users.
Yeah, product development.
Because most of the times internal products are generally simpler than products that will have to be used by your actual users.
So then, that's already like suggesting like the place for no code right now, no? In which like in the product development, in the story or the life cycle of the product development of a product, then it's like we are setting like the no code as a very elegant solution for the first steps.
Yeah.
Right. And for prototyping, so it's like doing faster and basically approaching getting a better approach on this fail faster kind of approach of product development.
Yeah. Right? And nowadays is becoming less and less necessary to then refactor whatever you're doing into traditional code, because no code and low code especially is becoming more and more powerful, But I would say that it's still the sweet spot for no code and low code use cases is early stages. For internal tools, I think it can be a complete substitute for traditional software. Like tools like a Retool, for instance, they are designed explicitly for developers to create interfaces with a drag and drop interface. And I don't think you necessarily have to transition to traditional code if what you care is usability or features, because you can do a lot of use cases with that. There's going to be another use case in which you want to transition maybe, but that's more, depending on your company, if you want to own the intellectual property of what you're building. And that's another topic, but it's more obviously advanced.
Yeah, I can branch out now. I have two possibilities. Let's go one. First, for the most obvious after this, or for the more generic. Let's go for the more generic.
All right.
Let's go listing a little bit of pros and cons between classical software engineering and what is no-code tools. So you already listed some, right? So it's like, okay, no-code tools are like when you are developing with no code, you're faster, right?
Sure.
Rather than classical software engineer. So what else can we see in that comparison?
Yeah, I mean, for me, we should split in this pros and cons between no code and low code, because obviously we tend to use them interchangeably, but they're not. No code is literally solutions that allow to do whatever they claim to do without writing code. Zero. Or is optional, but is very, minimal in terms of the impact that it has on the overall usability of the no-code tool. Low-code tools, on the other hand, are tools in which usually the most of the part is done visually, but there is some code, which is not necessarily a requirement, but is important to go like from, like to step two.
Yeah, as plugins, no, as parts of the
exactly
of the
as parts or as something that you have to handle. You're just gonna reduce the amount of code like massively.
Okay.
An example of this is Retool, which is built for engineers. It's not necessarily built for the how they call it, like the democratic developer, the person that doesn't know how to code and that wants to, whatever, like some kind of operator. No, is designed for code. For programmers, and there are some like WeWeb, for instance. There's several, and I can mention more later if you want. But there are two different things. For no code, if we remain in no code land, obviously the pros are it's very fast. So you can literally get something out in a matter of hours, if not days. It allows people that don't know how to code to do something that it would cost them tens of thousands, if not more, to do without the necessity to hire a developer. And that's obviously very powerful. So speed and investment / effort, plus even making it possible in general, you know. Obviously, the cons are they're generally not very flexible. The more you can do out of the box usually in the tool, the less flexible you are. So you are on Rails, so you can do those things. And if you want to go out of that perimeter, usually you can't.
Yeah,
you know?
or finding strange workarounds, right?
The thing is that it sometimes is not really possible. So if those platforms are very closed, so to say, you can do whatever you can do there and nothing else. You know, but obviously here is a discussion that should be done tool by tool. You know, I have the strong feeling, because that's where I see the industry going, that every no-code tool will end up being a low-code tool, because there is no way you can address all the options. If you want to be a generalistic tool that can do like a little bit of everything, let's imagine a tool to make applications like web apps or native apps. Eventually, there's going to be many use cases.
Right.
You know, and if you want to be flexible, you need to open up. Otherwise, you cannot program.
Yeah.
You cannot oversee all the possibilities.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me think about, maybe I'm going to go too hardcore here, but as a software engineer, there's this principle inside of one of the clean code principles that is called open-close relationship. It stands for the O, that says that a module should be close to change and open to extensibility.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what you were describing right now, in which like the no-code tools, it's difficult actually. It's not that they should be closed for change. It's like it's actually difficult. You rely on the owner team, like the company that is owning the tool and the product, and so that's difficult to happen. But instead, they should invest on it to be extensible. So then you have the freedom to use it the way you want.
Yeah. Obviously, a big example of the success of this has been also something like WordPress. You know, eventually, WordPress is somehow some kind of predecessor of a no-code tool. It was not labeled as that, but it enabled a lot of people to create a website without knowing a line of PHP, even to the point of abuse. You know, we have all seen, if you've worked in some kind of level as a software engineer, opening like a WordPress backend and seeing like 2 million plugins is something that you know you probably experienced.
Which is dangerous too.
It's horrible, but still, whatever. Well, anyhow, that's the problem. You know, eventually you rely a lot on somebody else's work, but when I say this, that you are reliant on somebody else's work, I try to think in my head, all right, what about those NPM modules that you are installing that have 1 billion dependencies? So we're all dependent on that.
In which there are quite crazy stories.
Exactly. There are quite crazy stories of stuff that, you know, whatever. Anyhow, the thing is that it is definitely a con, you know, but it's not that it's necessarily a pro for coding, because we are, even when you develop anything with code, you are dependent on an obscure library that some guy is creating and is probably you know running the world.
You have to do your research. You have to do your own due diligence on the things that you
so that's also some kind of stuff that is shared. Obviously, the big cons is that it's not your platform. So in that sense, you can do whatever it is designed to do, and for some there is more extensibility through plugins or these kind of things.
Right.
But eventually you don't own the platform. So if the company wants to change pricing, for instance, it may turn your application, your environment from profitable, or your company from profitable to not profitable, or decrease your margin like a lot. And I'm saying this because it happened like very recently with Bubble. You know, they changed the logic of pricing, and a lot of people were very unhappy about that. You know,
Which then that's a good suggestion for anyone that is looking for building their business on top of no code.
Yeah.
Is like either prototyping or like, well, a little bit what you said, no? Either prototyping or Horizon 3. No, or things that are not part of your core business. Yes? If it's part of your core business, prototyping is fine. But then later, if you're looking for selling your company at some point to make an exit or something, it's better if you start doing it yourself.
Yeah, of course.
After you validate it.
The thing is that, to me, the question when is asked implies an absolute answer. Which is better? Which should you choose? And my answer regarding no code and code, my answer to this is that I'm not in love with this argument, the code versus no code. Obviously, no code is a nice marketing label and is also very clear, to use. But I don't necessarily care that much about these two. How can I say the war between the two? Because it's not a war. Eventually, it's just a tool that you have to better get to your goal. In an easier and faster way.
And they integrate.
Exactly. And that's it. Eventually it depends what you want to do. You can totally run your company if it's you don't want to sell it, or if it's a product that maybe it is, you are a solopreneur and you just want to create a side project that is gonna, with some recurring income, you can just have your platform running on no code forever. So it's really contingent on the stage you're in. And a lot of times I'm asked, by people I consult, okay, we want to build an MVP, but we're worried about the scalability of no code. If you're asking yourself this question, but you never have anyone trying your product, you never validated your product, you're asking the very wrong question. Is there something that, I know, for someone that comes from a technical background would be, okay, should I use a Node or Go for my backend? All right, but who cares? Do you have a product or not? If you work for Uber, then that's a big question, if you are the CTO of Uber with those volumes. But if you're just starting out and whatever, if you know PHP, just use PHP and have something shipped. It doesn't matter at all, in my opinion. So again, it is not like an absolute answer. It depends on the context.
Right, totally. So what about, just to close the thing on the pros and cons, what usually one of the arguments is that as you are like relying on a pricing, on a pricing wall, on a payment wall, then it's more expensive than to have it in-house. I suppose that, as you were saying, it's more expensive on the long run, but in the short term, like what you're not counting here is the development time.
That's exactly the point. If you factor in the development time and the cost, is just
the overhead.
It's just no-brainer. Obviously, there's gonna be a point in which there is, an inflection point in which one becomes more, especially if you have a lot of users. Eventually, but it depends on product to product. But if you charge, they usually charge by user. A lot of these tools charge by user, and eventually if it adds up, but there are hybrids, for instance, some that allow you to create front ends, and you can plug in your own backend and database. So you have some hybrid solutions where you can use no code for something and traditional development tools, so to say, in a developer arsenal to manage everything else.
Right.
So you're less dependent on that. But yeah, that's definitely a fair point. But again, these kind of discussions about scalability and being at the mercy of a merchant, they're still valid for when you code. If you use AWS and they change the pricing for whatever reason, or they calculate, even because I still have to meet someone that understands how they calculate pricing. AWS and Google Cloud is very opaque. It's very hard to understand exactly all the components that go into it. So if they decide to change pricing, like especially Google Cloud did it like several times, then it's the same problem. You are at the mercy of someone else. If you really want to to be sure, you just have to own everything, the infrastructure, the technology, everything. But that's something that 2023. has less and less reason to be, so to say, because you have so much alternatives.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's a matter of how many options do you have, right? And then it's like if you build your system elegantly in an elegant way, then you can switch like these layers like accordingly. So I suppose that as it grows, the more healthier it becomes.
Exactly.
Okay. So I suppose like I was thinking maybe it will help like someone listening to this or viewing whatever. Maybe materialize a little bit. Like we were talking about technologies, no code, where to. Can you explain something? And also as part of, I don't know, something that crazy that you thought I never thought I was able to construct something like this, and no code made that happen, or something cool that you built. Can you describe it?
Sure. So I think you should think into the three big components of product development or software development. So I'm just going to simplify it like radically, obviously. So we have an interface, we have a logic, some kind of business logic, and some data, right? There are some tools that allow you to manage all the three, and usually the more you can manage, the more the tool is opinionated on how you should manage it. So the less is close to coding, or the less you can customize. So you give away on flexibility, you get in simplicity, so to say, in terms of the fact that everything is in the same place. Let's imagine Excel. Another example in no-code land would be Airtable. You do the interface, you do the data structure, and you do the logic. But it comes with limitations. There are some other tools that are just one of these three. And usually what they do well is that basically leverage APIs to communicate together. And they how can I say, reciprocally integrate. So the ones that I like the most are these ones, like to keep a little bit of a separation, and to give flexibility. And with those tools, you can do a lot. The easiest way I can how can I say, push the listeners to visualize it is to just look at Retool, look at WeWeb, look at Bubble. Just go into their showcase in their landing pages, and you can see what has been done that way. For myself, I built like a field application with Flutterflow. It would be used by industrial companies to basically pairing with computer vision to understand what would be the problem to valves, industrial valves, valves that carry some kind of liquids, high pressure liquids like water, these kind of things, and is custom trained. So that part of creating the machine learning model is traditional code, so to say.
Yeah.
It's separated because
like a module.
That's something that, now is evolving so fast, the environment in AI, that there are already tools to do it, but still, already no-code tools to do it, but still is something that has been done with traditional code. But all the interface is completely done with no-code, And I was impressed because it was a couple of years ago, but it was the first project that I've done in Flutterflow, and the quality of the output was pretty impressive. So for whatever it is not a game, so something extremely platform specific, there are some no-code tools that would probably, at some level, I would say 90% of the stuff that you could do with code, you could do it with that, and the normal user would never understand that there is a difference.
I assume that Flutterflow, because I don't know it, but I assume that it's like Webflow, but for Flutter.
That's a very good way to put it. Yes.
Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that exists. Yeah, it's amazing actually. Yeah, like an application for accessing this module of computer vision that integrates with something that
eventually is also something that again, we shouldn't be black and white thinking about low code and no code. They can go very well together. And I would say that the biggest, the people that would benefit the most of this transition or this option, new option, are developers. Because
So absolutely, it's like what I was thinking when you were talking about these things. Is like, wow, it's like at some point we will have to start talking about the role of the no code architect.
Yeah.
No? Which it's like a system architect.
Of course.
In which like now it's or system designer, no, that then you know what piece to put everywhere, like okay, in the center of data, in this layer we're going to put that thing, or even training system designers to also have like this catalog of no code tools. So maybe they can do something, they can put like, this module in here in the middle, so it does this thing more efficiently, or it just does it and we don't have to pay for it. We don't have to pay for its development. So I think that it's a very interesting overlap that happens in there for someone this specialized and say, no, we can put like all these things together, and anybody that is designing tools like this
Absolutely.
should know about bottlenecks, should know about all these kind of things. No? So it's
Absolutely.
it's like absolutely interesting. Right. So now, how do you? Let's go for no codes right now. So, like let's stick to that. What are the major challenges? You already like introduced that a little bit, but what are the major challenges and the things that should be solved in no code
Yeah.
to continue improving, to continue growing as it is right now?
Yeah. So to me, the major challenge in general is the deployment. If they want to grow into something, especially for no code. For low code, there are lots of tools that allow development environments and production environment. Most of no code tools, they don't. So that's a gigantic problem if you want to use it for something somehow serious, because obviously anyone that develop anything in their life know that developing in production is not like the smartest idea. Let's put it this way, So that is a big issue. And even when these platforms have development environments, staging environments, and production environment, the deploy is painful. So it's not necessarily, and I'm not talking about errors. I'm talking about the experience, the user experience in the tools. So it's literally the part that requires more time and more understanding, which is somehow counterintuitive, because one of the big pros of these platforms is you don't ever think about DevOps. You don't never have to think about these kind of things. But this is a major consideration. But low code tools are much better at this, right? Also because they can afford some level of complexities, because usually the users of those tools are developers that know a little bit more.
Yeah. It's like the same thing as you should know a little bit about system design.
Of course.
Now you should know about what is a development stage, what is a pre-production or like staging, what is production. Yeah, that's actually.
Yeah, I mean,
something I was
eventually,
not thinking about.
it's what we were discussing before. I think that if you want to be serious about no code, you need to know a little bit of code. You must understand. If you don't know how APIs work at all, it's very hard. If you don't know how to structure a database, it's hard. You can build something. You can build even something that is okay from the standpoint of the end user, but it's gonna be too simple, or it's gonna have too many workarounds. Eventually.
Finally,
It's totally fine to start with that, but if you want to be serious, you need to start thinking more as a developer would think.
yeah.
And not necessarily have to be a developer, or having worked years as a developers, but start to think in that with that, how can I say, framework, in terms of the way you see things.
Yeah. So maybe finally, someone is going to take a look at the UX of deploying
Yeah.
and DevOps and all
Yeah,
this.
that would be amazing for both of the worlds,
That
you
would
know.
be a
know?
great side effect. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's an absolute challenge. I can see that.
And another big challenge, which is more in the industry, is what I mentioned at the very beginning, is fragmentation. There are so many tools, you know, which is something that if you are a front end developer, you know very well. I mean, the fragmentation that we have right now, which is also good with all the frameworks or the JavaScript frameworks. There are a million,
Yeah.
you know. But there's going to be a point in which there's going to be consolidation, and for JavaScript frameworks, could be Next.js or the big names. In no-code and low-code tools, there is definitely some kind of consolidation around some big names, Bubble, etc. But it's still very early stage. Eventually, it's much more popular than it was just 3-4 years ago. I mean, during the pandemic, they exploded, like lots of other tech stuff. But it's still big room to go, in my opinion. You know, there's very little knowledge, and if there is knowledge, it's more about some specific tools, like Airtable, for instance, rather than no code in general, right? So there's very few people that actually tried more than one tools if they're not in the industry, right? I mean, even if Flutterflow is extremely popular in this world, it's the first time you heard it, you know, and you are in technology, you know. So eventually, there's still some time in that sense for people to not necessarily be educated, but just be exposed to no code in general and just try it. Because the good thing about no code is if you try it, you understand it. If you just spend 1 hour trying one of the major tools, you will understand immediately, if you are a developer, the potential of this, you know. And if you spend 5-6 hours, you're also going to understand all the limitations, and you can make up your mind if it makes sense or not. And if you're a non-developer, maybe you have to invest a little bit more time, but again, it's going to become very evident what are the potential, because you are able to do something that otherwise it would be totally impossible to do.
Yeah, it's like in the end, that's like driving you into that direction, right? But at least maybe you have to make the effort in order to learn like some other things, but at least you don't have to learn the entire software engineering
Exactly.
on that side. No? So yeah.
And it's a good way to approach coding as well. You know, you start with no code if
Which
you
is
don't know
like a lower
anything,
level,
and then
yeah.
you understand, all right, in order
Totally
to
makes
step up
sense.
my game, I need to learn a little bit of code, and then you get into that. And that's
Makes
also a very
sense.
good way to start.
We kind of have seen this already. Yeah, some people that are interested on coding after like having played with no code technologies,
Yeah, that's
and then
great.
it's like I want to do more. I want to be
Yeah.
able to.
Yeah, that
personalize
doesn't
all these
surprise
things.
me at all.
Yeah, that's true. Right. So a little bit related to this, I think I can guess a little bit because of your words, but should a software engineer of any level, it can be like someone that is starting right now, should be worried about no code? Because right now we have like a lot of things to worry about.
Yes.
No, it's AI now. It's
Yeah,
like no code,
I
but
think AI is much bigger concern than no code is.
we should be looking now.
You know,
No?
AI is a concern for everybody. No, but aside from joking, no, not at all. I mean, I will stress it again. I don't see a war between no code and code. That doesn't make any sense. Plus, I mean, I don't know about all the listeners, but if I have to avoid having to code myself another React form, I'm super happy. If I can sign not to ever code one other React form, I'm super happy. You know, so it's just gonna take away some of the very recurring boilerplate stuff that one has to do, and not only boilerplate, like even advanced stuff, and just focus on what matters. You know, so no code, again, what I was saying at the beginning, there's no way no code is gonna completely, or at least I cannot see it in the foreseeable future, completely replace code. Meaning there's gonna be stuff that you have to code because it's too custom, or you need to add this effect, or you need to add this business logic, or it just doesn't make any sense with no code, because in no code it would be like very complex. You would add a lot of complexity, and with code is maybe 4 lines. So it just makes more sense to code it rather than to code that function rather than to have to find workarounds with no code. So there's always gonna be these cases, but especially at this stage now, for front-end developers or for back-end developers that have to build some kind of interface to use their application or their solution, is the part that is more mature. So building interfaces, especially for business tasks, so you have to rely on tables, on those kind of things, on grids, etc. There's a lot of option, and that's very good because eventually, instead of having to spend a lot of time into something which is a very basic CRUD application, you can just drag and drop, and you can focus on the logic, for instance, or the data structure, or as the example that I gave before, I could just build a very simple, a very fast interface for my users, and then focus on the machine learning algorithm, for instance.
Right.
And that's it.
So, all right. So if you would have to, I don't know if to recommend me because of the director of a program or a software engineer starting with this, what would be the technology that you would start from? Like, let's say that someone is capable of doing a full stack application.
Yeah.
And then you say you can start leveraging. You will say the front end first.
I would say that the most. I think that it would be the most impressive as a first approach. Like, probably statistically, and you know much better than I do. So I'm just going on a limb here. Lots of people start coding with front end at some level because it's visual, because you have an output that is tangible. I'm not saying that everybody is like this, but maybe it's the first approach. Then
it's perceived simpler.
Yeah, it is perceived simpler.
Something that we can discuss.
It's perceived simpler, and eventually is something that, and I do almost only backend stuff. So I'm on the other side. Let's say I'm on the other team, but still, I started myself also with front end because it's something which is more immediately understandable. Okay, you are painting something on a screen, right? So it's also good. It also applies with no code. Eventually, it's good because you immediately see the result of what you're doing, and especially for people that are developers, are coming from technical background, and you know the complexity that goes into managing a form. To be able to just do it in maybe half an hour, what would take maybe days with all the front end and back end checks, and et cetera, is going to give you a very good idea of the potential you have in your hands. And again, maybe you see that with the limitations, you cannot go and do whatever you want to do, but is a good approach for you to start understanding that there is value there. And it's worth keep exploring.
Yeah. Okay. So, regarding what you said before, you mentioned AI and what to worry about and what not to. I would like to put that on the same bag now, and that's very interesting what you said. It's like not at all. It's like you actually should be interested in no code, low code, and actually you mentioned AI. Well, I did first, but then it's like I always defend the same position here. It's like I don't know where AI is going to bring us. I don't know, like nobody knows right now.
Sure.
But one thing for sure is that someone has to integrate AI. I don't know what's going to be AI, but someone has to integrate it, right? To our current systems that they don't have AI. It cannot, it can. If AI can integrate itself,
exactly. Unless OpenAI will do everything,
then we are going to talk again, maybe. But I will be concerned. But someone has to integrate it. No code, low code. Someone has to integrate that thing. Someone has to be responsible of getting that system, put it together. And this is where software engineers can thrive, as well, what you have been repeating the entire podcast, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. And eventually, the analogy that I can give is think about what WordPress did to website development. Eventually, yes, your friend, the friend of the friend, is doing some websites, the classic guy that didn't know anything that otherwise would have been done by a developer back then. But those are like the very low level website. If you're working with a company or whatever, they're gonna always go to professionals, and maybe it's not gonna be with code. Maybe it's gonna be with some kind of WordPress plugin, or it's gonna be with Webflow in the future. But eventually, for most use cases, there's gonna be the need of technical knowledge. There's going to be the need of, okay, when I don't know what to do or when I have to do this customization and Webflow doesn't allow me to do it, I have to write code. There's no other way around it. So eventually you're taking away stuff that would otherwise been done by a developer and do it in a simpler way, and then for you to focus on something that matters. But it's something that we always see also in development. Even all the revolution with DevOps, or the fact that npm modules are a way for you to write less and not to have to do everything yourself. So if there are workarounds, usually developers are gonna look into that because nobody likes to do more than they should on something that is not mission critical. So let's put it this way: is another way for developers to just focus on the most important work, and just not to be to talk just for developers. It's a great way. It's actually the only way for non-developers to create something that otherwise would be very expensive or would take a long time to develop.
Okay, so where do you see the industry going? What are the next steps of no code and low code?
Yeah, for me there are two. It's something that I briefly mentioned before. One is consolidation. So it's just impossible that the industry will grow in conscience and in visibility if we have so many tools, right? There's just too many. They all look very similar, but it's just too much stuff to try, and every day there's something. So I expect consolidation. I expect the bigger player to just start swallowing other small players or just emerge as a powerhouse, and that's already happening in some aspect of no code. And the other thing that I see again is that low code and no code are going to merge. So every no code tools will become a low code tool, right? And low code, like pure low code, is gonna stay because maybe there's something that is completely tied to developers, and it requires just technical knowledge in order to be used. But all low code tools will become no code tools.
Right.
And
as an opt-in, at least.
Exactly, as an opt-in, for sure as an opt-in, and exactly what we were saying before. I don't see a company being able to create all the possible use cases. So, like for more mature solutions like Bubble, all the big players are gonna start to open their environment for developers to create plugins on. Let's think at a very healthy environment like Shopify, which is eventually a no-code tool. Shopify has a very mature marketplace for plugin. So those are the success stories that the industry is moving towards.
Okay. Well, so thank you very much. That was absolutely amazing. That was very educative.
That was fun.
Yeah. So I would say, as a last question, and maybe as a takeaway for our viewers, if you had to start with no code technologies, low code, the same thing. We have to come up with like a name for both.
Exactly.
And that's it. Settle it in there. So, what would be the path to start with that?
Yeah, if you are non-developer, I would probably start with Airtable, because as I mentioned before, Airtable has the data, so the database, the interface, and the logic all in one platform, and it's pretty simple, So if you ever use a spreadsheet, it's not a spreadsheet because it's not a matrix, it's more similar to a relational database, but without going technical, it's something that one can pick up very quickly, and you can kind of try the potential of this kind of tools. So the very first approach I would say is that, because also is one of the biggest player in the industry. If you are interested in developing not necessarily apps but websites, I would tell Webflow, because it's one of the more mature, and it's kind of awesome. You can do literally any kind of website with that, static website. I mean, so it's a great point to it's a great first touch point with no code. If you are a developer, I would probably say start with Retool. Is one of my favorites in general. It's just for front end, and you can just bring your own backend in it, especially all the databases. If you have, I don't know, already an infrastructure and you want to build some kind of tool to test, you can test the potential, and you can understand how no-code tools, low-code tools work, because they work in a very similar way. And that's the one that I would recommend for developers to start exploring.
Yeah, okay. That's perfect. Thank you very much. And actually,
Thank you.
I invite everybody to start following you on LinkedIn, because you are publishing like amazing content in there.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I publish a lot, at least. No, I'm not sure it's amazing, but...
No, I can tell you. I can tell you. A lot of content and good quality content in order to see like the also like the last trends and what are the good practices on this world. That was, as I said, very educational. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
For this time, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Let's see you in the next episode.
Like this.